You're just a cog in the machine. That line hit like a slap, but not the kind that stings. The kind that confirms everything you already knew. It was 9:13 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just taken my first sip of stale conference room coffee, and I could still taste the powdered creamer when the COO decided to publicly castrate me in front of the junior execs. He said it with that corporate smirk that only men who inherited their position and their veneers can pull off. Just a cog, that's what he called me. The room went silent like someone pulled the fire alarm. My ears rang, but my face stayed calm. No blink, no twitch. I just capped my pen, folded my notes, and nodded like he'd complimented my shoes instead of stripped me of a decade's worth of sacrifice. Because here's the thing, I'd heard worse. Much worse. But I'd never heard it from someone whose entire production line relied on me not quitting. I ran logistics for a mid-tier manufacturing firm whose whole flagship product, some fancy high-pressure aerospace sealant, relied on one rare, chemically unstable raw material sourced from one lab in one part of Vietnam. And that entire relationship, from customs paperwork to late-night birthday calls to their CEO's mom, went through exactly one person. Me. Now before I go further, if this story's even half as satisfying as it felt to live through it, do me one solid favor, tap that follow button. Help me hit my first 10,000 subscribers. I promise more unhinged corporate war stories with extra spice and zero HR filters. All right, let's get back to the wreckage. So there I sat, still and composed while his words echoed, just a cog. I looked around that table, 2 interns pretending to check their phones, 1 VP shifting in her chair, trying not to make eye contact. Nobody said a damn word, and that's when I decided. Right there, I wouldn't rage, I wouldn't cry. I'd exit, but not before pulling the right bolt out of their machine. See, a decade ago, we were scrambling for a stable supply line. No one in procurement could get the Vietnamese lab to even return a call. They didn't speak in purchase orders or RFQs. They worked on trust. And after 3 months of handwritten letters, gift baskets, and learning how to say please in their dialect without sounding like a jackass, I landed the deal. The clause was simple, they only shipped through me, and that was fine with the CEO back then. He even let me sign it personally. Called it a relationship contract. Whatever. Nobody touched it after it worked. Nobody except me. I knew their production calendar better than I knew my own cycle. I coordinated shipments so precise you could set a Swiss watch to M. I once rerouted a delivery around a typhoon and a customs strike without losing a day. I didn't just manage the supply line, I was the supply line. But to the COO, I was just a liaison, a corporate paper shuffler, someone who forwarded emails and booked flights. That's all he saw, because that's all men like him ever choose to see. You do your job too well, they forget you're doing it. That meeting ended like any other. The new marketing guy pitched a slide deck with stock photos of happy welders. The CFO asked about margin erosion. I sat there, quietly scripting my exit in my head while that idiot kept talking like he hadn't just nuked the one person keeping his quarterly forecasts from going up in smoke. 2 days later, I booked a call with the lab director. Her name's Lynn. She calls me sister. She picked up on the first ring. Is something wrong? She asked. Not yet, I said, but I think we should talk. And that's when I felt it, something uncoil in my chest. Not anger, not fear, something colder. Resolve. I was done being their cog. But when I left, I'd make sure they learned exactly what kind of machine they were dealing with. The morning I handed in my resignation, I wore the same gray blazer I wore the day I signed the supplier contract. Not because I'm sentimental, because I wanted the symbolism, even if no one else would catch it. 10 years full-time, and my exit interview was scheduled between the junior analyst's onboarding and some wellness webinar about embracing workplace change. I walked into HR like I was ordering lunch. Polite, professional, cold-blooded. No tremble in the voice, no trembling lip. Just a 2-line letter printed on thick ivory stock and clipped to a manila folder that I slid across the desk. The HR rep blinked twice like she expected more. A meltdown, a threat, a severance negotiation, something. Instead, I smiled and said, 2 weeks from today. No need to throw a party. Back at my desk, I started packing things slowly. My motion was precise, deliberate, almost reverent. Notebooks with handwritten meeting notes in 3 languages. A chipped ceramic cup from Hanoi I used to hold pens. Jade frog paperweight Lynn sent me after I helped her clear a stuck shipment during Lunar New Year. At the bottom drawer sat a black file folder with 1 label, handwritten in silver ink. Primary supplier binding terms. I slipped it into my leather tote without opening it. It didn't belong here anymore. As I worked, my mind drifted backward, not to the insults or missed raises, but to the beginning. The real work. Back when we had no leverage. The Vietnamese supplier had no reason to trust a no-name American company that couldn't even pronounce their region correctly. Everyone had written them off as difficult, but I knew difficult in corporate speak usually meant we never tried to understand them. So I learned. I stayed up nights reading about their customs, their business etiquette, their cultural holidays. I memorized family names. When Lynn's mother passed, I sent white orchids and a condolence letter written in formal Vietnamese, triple-checked by a local interpreter. When her son was born, I shipped over a hand-knitted baby blanket and a bottle of American whiskey for her husband. I kept time zones in my head like a second religion. Midnight for me meant lunchtime for her. There was the call where she sobbed over a blocked port, and I stayed on the line for 4 hours until it cleared. One where we shared tea over video and she told me I worked harder than most men she knew. That's what I was leaving behind. Not a company, a legacy. A bridge between two hemispheres built on mutual respect and late nights and actual damn effort. Of course, none of that made it into the farewell email. That went out the day before my last. Subject, moving on body. It's been a rewarding journey. Thank you all for the opportunities and the memories. My last day will be Friday. No mention of where I was going. No contact info. No open-ended keep in touch. Just a period, cold and clean. Some people dropped by my cubicle to say goodbye. The ones who mattered already knew I wasn't walking into a break, I was walking toward leverage. One junior PM glanced at the mostly empty desk and asked, "Are you really okay leaving all this behind?" I looked around the office, cheap carpet, flickering lights, the same damn snack bar for 5 years, and said, "It was never really mine, was it? But the file in my bag, that was mine. And it was about to become very useful." His name was Ethan. Spelled the normal way, but with the energy of someone who'd once gone viral for shotgunning a monster energy on a corporate retreat. Fresh from some strategic procurement boot camp in Texas, rocking a Navy suit too tight for real work, and that glassy overconfidence that only comes from having failed upward your entire life. He strolled into my old cubicle 3 days after I left, whistling, like he was walking into a damn sitcom. "Guess I'm the new supply line wizard," he joked to no one in particular, plopping his laptop onto the desk like it owed him rent. He turned to an associate nearby and said, "They told me the lady before me was some kind of legend, but logistics is logistics, right? Right. Just like a scalpel is a steak knife, and a wedding ring is a vending machine trinket." The COO, Greg, in case I forgot to mention his name, which I didn't because I didn't care, held an all hands to reassure the team that everything was fully under control. I got forwarded the recording by an engineer friend I used to share lunch breaks with. Greg stood in front of a fake plant and said with that lizard-slick tone, "Change is natural. We appreciate her years of service, but the system isn't built on individuals, it's built on process. The machine keeps running." Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Lynn was waiting for a reply to her customs clearance email. A time-sensitive, legally binding, internationally routed shipment confirmation. Sent 2 days earlier. Still unread. The silence grew teeth. First ripple hit end of week. A small delay reported from the port. Nothing catastrophic, just odd, no explanation, just a note that the cargo was held pending authorization. No escalation, no follow-up. Ethan brushed it off. Probably a clerical thing, he told the floor supervisor. They always say that in the Southeast Asian corridors. Nothing to panic about, except I knew better. That was panic. Dressed in linen and wearing a polite smile. A few days later, the real blow landed. Shipment canceled. Reason, unverified intermediary. Greg got the email first. My contact at the supplier had finally responded to inform the company very succinctly that all future shipments would be suspended until their authorized representative returned to the negotiation table. No fluff, no apology. Just Vietnamese business etiquette, silence as punishment. I, on the other hand, got a different email. Short, direct. The kind of message that said everything without saying much at all. "We work only with you. Shall we continue under new terms?" Lynn didn't threaten, she didn't beg, she didn't gloat, she offered. And that was the moment I knew the damage wasn't coming. It had already arrived, they just hadn't figured it out yet. By the end of that week, whispers started drifting through Slack channels. Why are production buffers shrinking? Why is Project Raptor on hold? Why hasn't Ethan posted in the procurement dashboard? My inbox, meanwhile, was lighting up from competitors. One in particular caught my eye. Smaller, hungrier, run by a woman I respected from a past conference. They were scaling up and running into material constraints. I sent a 2-line reply, "Let's talk." The machine hadn't stopped yet. But now, even its own parts were starting to ask, why does it smell like burning? First factory floor went quiet on a Monday. That's when you know it's real. Mondays are chaos. Mondays are forklifts groaning, air compressors hissing, supervisors yelling over machines that were built during the Cold War and never stopped running. But that day, nothing but awkward silence and one sad radio playing Bon Jovi on low volume. The titanium boron shipment was officially 4 days late. That might not sound like much, but in manufacturing, 4 days is a death sentence wrapped in an apology email. Without the alloy blend, line 2 couldn't even start the mixing process. Line 3 relied on line 2 byproduct. By the end of the shift, 3 production cells were twiddling their thumbs and racking up idle hours like it was a union holiday. Greg, of course, didn't blink. At the morning ops call, he blamed supply chain inconsistencies. By lunch, it was weather events in the Pacific Corridor. By end of day, staffing inefficiencies. That last one pissed people off. I got the first panic DM around 2:43 p.m. "Please tell me you didn't actually leave them high and dry. You did something right?" I didn't answer, not yet. Meanwhile, Ethan had gone radio silent. Apparently he'd tried sending an escalation request to the supplier. It bounced. Then he tried WhatsApp, left on read. Poor kid still thought ghosting was something that only happened on Hinge. Behind the scenes, I was building a real machine. The boutique rival I'd contacted, let's call them Helix MFG, had serious potential. They weren't big, but they were sharp. No dead weight. No legacy systems from 2006 still duct taped to Excel macros. I didn't tell them everything, not yet. Just enough to prove I knew the road and held the map. By the end of the week, I had flown out to their HQ under the guise of an informal discussion. In 3 hours, I gave them more clarity than their last two consultants combined. Showed them how to reroute their fulfillment paths, identify weak link vendors, and pre-clear customs with a broker I trusted in Da Nang. Then came the keystone. I slid a red folder across their VP's desk. Inside, a proposal. One line stood out in bold: raw material continuity through exclusive intermediary agreement, term flexible. Their COO looked at me and asked, "Is this legal?" "Absolutely," I said. "It's also inevitable." Back at my old company, the walls were buckling. Supervisors began forwarding complaints. External clients started asking questions, real questions, not the kind you answer with buzzwords. One aerospace partner issued an official warning. "If delivery is not restored within 10 business days, we will begin pursuing alternative suppliers." Greg held another town hall, voice strained, tie crooked. He told the staff this was just a hiccup, that procurement is a team sport. Someone in the back coughed the word bullshit just loud enough to be plausible deniability. One floor manager quit mid-shift, walked off the line, threw his badge on the break room table and said, "I'm not going down with this circus." The ripple turned to waves. And me? I was sipping black coffee in Helix MFG's glass-walled boardroom, sketching out their new logistics workflow. I watched the news feed on my phone like a slow-motion train wreck. You know that moment in a horror movie when the monster's already inside the house, but the characters keep opening doors like everything's fine? Yeah, that's what it felt like. Only this time, the monster wasn't hiding in the closet. She was sitting in a competitor's office with a pen, a contract, and one hell of a grudge. The investor call was live-streamed at 10 a.m. sharp, and I watched it from a corner table at a quiet espresso bar with decent Wi-Fi and a perfect view of my little digital demolition project. Greg looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, which, judging by the twitch under his left eye, was accurate. He wore a jacket too big for his frame, hair shellacked back like a ventriloquist dummy, and opened with his trademark smirk. Only this time, it flickered. "Good morning, stakeholders," he began, voice just a tick too high. "We've been experiencing some temporary supply chain turbulence." Turbulence, like the Titanic hit a pothole. He rattled off phrases like unexpected material disruptions, proactive mitigation strategies, and my personal favorite, cross-functional resilience realignment. The CEO sat beside him, lips pinched into a thin, silent line. He didn't say a word for the first half hour, just nodded occasionally, like someone slowly realizing the pilot had left the cockpit mid-flight. I sipped my espresso and waited, because I already knew what was really happening. That morning, my inbox had 3 anonymous screenshots. No subject lines, no signatures, just the raw panic of corporate rot setting in. Email 1 from a floor manager: "We are now 7 days behind on the composite blend batch. Ethan has not responded. No usable guidance from executive leadership." Email 2 from procurement: "Contact attempts to the supplier have failed. They referred us to the previous liaison. Legal says we can't force compliance due to Clause 7.3. Does anyone know what Clause 7.3 is?" Email 3 from Greg to the CEO, timestamp 2:11 a.m. "I was not aware the contract was non-transferable. This is being weaponized against us. We may need to prepare for investor fallout." Weaponized. Like I was some rogue arms dealer instead of the woman they called a cog. Right around the time Greg was fumbling through a prepared Q&A, Helix MFG went live with their product launch. Full-page announcement on LinkedIn. Crisp branding, smiling engineers. They named the new product line Vanta Flex, same alloy base, better turnaround, and improved tensile specs. Guess where they sourced the material? At 10:42 a.m. Lynn sent her official reply to Greg's last Hail Mary email. I didn't see the message firsthand, but someone on the inside copied the meat of it into a private group chat and forwarded it my way. "Dear Mr. Wessler, as stated previously, we no longer have a valid agreement with your organization. Our production is now fully committed to a new partner. Thank you, L. Hone, no warmth, no openings, a deadbolt click." I didn't laugh, I didn't cheer. Not yet, instead. I closed my laptop and walked out into the sun. People assume revenge feels like fire. But this wasn't fire, this was architecture. A new structure, clean and sharp, built in the footprint of the crumbling empire I'd left behind. I was done hiding. I didn't need to gloat. The machine was eating itself, and I had already sold the blueprints to a better one. The envelope was hand-delivered by a man in a wrinkled gray suit, who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. He muttered my name, confirmed it with a half-hearted ID check, and then handed over a thick stack of paper clipped inside a faux leather folder that probably cost more than Greg's soul. At the top, notice of legal complaint, alleged sabotage and misappropriation of proprietary supply chain agreements translation. They were trying to sue me for torching the very thing they lit the match under. I flipped through the pages slowly, sipping mint tea, and letting each accusation land with all the weight of a toddler throwing cotton balls. Intentional disruption of contractual obligations, unlawful retention of corporate assets, breach of loyalty. My personal favorite? The defendant manipulated exclusive channels for selfish gain, knowing it would cause irreparable damage. They spelled my name wrong on page 3, twice. My lawyer, Marcia Kellerman, a woman whose voice could curdle blood and whose memory of contract law was matched only by her hatred of corporate mansplaining, called me before I could even finish reading. They're bluffing, she said, bored, also desperate. Want me to end this politely or surgically? Surgically, I said. No anesthesia. We opened with the clause they forgot. The clause Greg had probably skimmed 10 years ago while thinking about his next round of golf. Clause 7.3 agreement binding to intermediary representative supplier maintains exclusive discretion to continue or terminate shipments based on relationship with named liaison, hereby listed as my full legal name. No successor may assume rights without express written consent of supplier. Stamped, signed, sealed by the original CEO, by Lynn. By me, Marcia sent over our rebuttal in a single, devastating PDF. Original contract communications confirming supplier refusal to transfer agreement, a timeline of my resignation. Clean and civil, a list of all Helix MFG correspondence post-employment, none of which included any proprietary information. She ended the email with 3 sentences that made me want to bake her a cake. We urge you to dismiss this baseless complaint. Should you wish to pursue further action, be advised we are prepared to counterclaim for defamation and damages. Thank you for your attention. The lawsuit collapsed faster than Greg's investor pitch. No public statement, no apology. Just silence, cold, stunned, bureaucratic silence. But the industry heard. Whispers started circulating at conferences and in Slack groups I was still quietly a part of. She left and took the entire backbone with her. They tried to sue her for contracts she literally owned. She's consulting now, be careful if she switches sides. One procurement director from a Fortune 500 firm reached out anonymously. You're kind of a legend right now. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The old company stopped talking about the lawsuit. Stopped talking about me. Stopped talking, period. Funny thing about trying to drag someone down in court, sometimes you just give them a bigger stage. Now, my name wasn't whispered out of fear. It was whispered with respect. The implosion wasn't cinematic. No explosions, no alarms. Just the slow, suffocating collapse of something once too bloated to move, and now too hollow to stand. It started with the aerospace account. One of the big ones. A contract that used to be framed on the hallway wall like a high school diploma. It pulled out with a 3-line statement that made the boardroom go ghost white. Due to ongoing fulfillment failures and uncertainty around supply stability, we are terminating our agreement effective immediately. That was the first domino. By the end of the week, 2 more clients announced they'd be reevaluating partnerships. One of them moved their next order to Helix MFG. I knew because I'd helped them draft the pitch deck. Inside the company, the floor buzzed with nervous energy. Slack channels filled with rumors. Why hasn't Greg posted since Friday? Who's the temp sitting in logistics now? I heard the supplier signed something exclusive. Is that even legal? The official announcement came the following Monday, disguised as a calendar invite. Emergency executive session board. Only 3 hours later, Greg was gone. Put on administrative leave, which is HR speak for we need you out before shareholders demand a blood sacrifice. The same man who told me I was just a cog had become the first part of the machine to be forcibly removed and buried under a thick layer of corporate spin. No farewell post, no email, no send-off party. Just a chair left vacant, his name tag quietly peeled off by an intern who probably didn't know who he was. And then it spread. Departments started cannibalizing each other. Legal blamed procurement. Procurement blamed logistics. HR started realigning resources, which meant layoffs in waves, disguised with transition packages and beige severance folders passed across conference tables like funeral pamphlets. I heard stories. Someone from accounting crying in the stairwell. One of the engineers emailing out their resume from the company printer. Project manager locking herself in a glass-walled office and ignoring knocks for 4 straight hours. And me? I was in Denver that week, sitting across from Helix MFG's new COO, mapping out their next 18 months of production. We were ahead of schedule and under budget. The text came in at 9:17 p.m. from Dana, an old colleague I used to split Thai takeout within the break room. They're talking about selling or liquidation. I think it's over. I read the words twice, then put the phone face down. I didn't feel joy, didn't feel hate, didn't feel anything, because this wasn't revenge anymore. This was inertia. A body left in motion, destined to keep crumbling under its own weight long after I walked away. It wasn't my fight now, it was physics. The gears were still spinning, but no one had noticed they weren't connected to anything anymore. The press release went out at 8:03 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. I didn't even have to look for it. Someone forwarded it to me with the subject line. Told you so. Breaking. Valence Industries files for Chapter 7, bankruptcy cites unrecoverable supply chain failure as primary cause just like that. 12 years of half-assed strategy, ego-driven cost-cutting, and bureaucratic arrogance swept into a 3-paragraph statement written by a junior PR assistant, probably crying in a bathroom stall between edits. It didn't mention my name. Of course they didn't. But I was everywhere in that press release. Unexpected material discontinuity, loss of key vendor access, cascading impact on contractual obligations. Every sentence was a funeral hymn in corporate legalese, composed by the very people who once told me to smile more in meetings. Greg was gone. Ethan, too. I heard he tried to delete all his Slack messages and then ghosted HR mid-investigation. Half the department had either jumped ship or been pushed overboard. And yet somehow I wasn't angry anymore. Not gloating, not even smug, I was done. A reporter reached out that afternoon. One of those tech business hybrid writers who dig through financial filings for drama and fresh meat. She asked if I'd be willing to comment on the situation, even off the record, just to add texture. I read her message twice, smiled faintly, and then closed the tab without responding. No comment, because the machine had already stopped. I didn't need to dance on the wreckage. I'd already built something better. Helix MFG's newest product line launched that same week. Clean rollout, no delays, clients from 3 continents. Industry buzz said we were poised to become the default supplier in the specialty composite market within 6 months. And sitting across from me in a quiet tea house tucked between 2 rows of cherry blossoms in Da Nang was Lynn. She poured the tea with practiced grace. No small talk, no ceremony, just business cloaked in trust. Between us sat a folder, thick with signatures and lined with ink that still smelled faintly of permanence. She looked up and said, "You were right to walk away." I nodded, took a slow sip, and watched the steam curl into the air like the final breath of a dying engine. "I was never a cog," I said, almost to myself. "I was the one who oiled the whole machine. And when I left, I took the oil with me. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear."